Imagine, just for a second, that you're 17 years old. You're sitting comfortably on a commercial flight, super excited to head home and spend Christmas with your family. It's 1971, and everything about this trip feels completely ordinary. But in literally a matter of moments, that perfectly normal journey is going to turn into one of the most wild, brutal, and awe-inspiring survival stories in human history. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're unpacking a true event that completely defies logic. We are looking at the incredible story of a young woman whose plane tore apart in midair, leaving her completely alone, free-falling through the clouds.
So let's dive right into this absolutely terrifying premise. 10,000. That is the number of feet she fell. We are talking about dropping nearly 2 whole miles straight down from the sky. And she wasn't falling into the ocean or, a soft snowbank. She was plummeting directly into the dense, completely unforgiving heart of the Peruvian Amazon. Now, logic tells us nobody survives the 2-mile fall. It just doesn't happen. But on Christmas Eve of 1971, the laws of physics and human fragility were completely shattered. To really grasp the sheer shock of what happened, we kind of have to look at the total normality that came right before it. Our subject here is Julianne Kopke. She was just a normal high school student traveling with her mom. The plan was simple: hop on a flight from Lima out to an Amazon research station where her dad worked. They boarded LANSA Flight 508 on December 24th for what was supposed to be a totally routine 1-hour trip. Just a quick hop over the jungle for the holidays. But radar from that day showed a massive, violent red storm cell looming directly in their path.
And about 40 minutes into the flight, they flew right into the belly of that thunderstorm. The escalation was breathtakingly fast. First, the plane starts to violently pitch and roll. It was so bad that luggage was literally flying out of the overhead bins. The turbulence was absolutely deafening. Then came the catastrophic failure. A blinding flash of lightning struck the right wing, instantly igniting the fuel tank. The hum of the jet engines was gone, replaced by the terrifying roar of rushing wind as the fuselage quite literally ripped apart in the sky.
In the middle of this unimaginable chaos, Giuliani later remembered her mother's chilling final words. She spoke them with this eerie calm right before the plane disintegrated. She just said, "That is the end. It's all over." Seconds later, Giuliani was violently sucked out into the freezing, thin air. Strapped tightly to her row of 3 seats, she was just tumbling endlessly through the sky before completely blacking out.
The next thing she knew, the Russian wind was gone. She woke up, completely disoriented, lying on the muddy jungle floor. Against all odds, she was actually alive. But how? Well, it turns out that as she fell into the Amazon, the immensely heavy, dense canopy of vines and trees acted like a giant net. It actually caught the row of seats she was strapped into, drastically slowing her momentum and breaking what should have been an impossible fall. It was, honestly, an absolute miracle.
But surviving the fall was just the beginning. The reality of her situation was incredibly stark. She was battered. We're talking a broken collarbone, a deep bleeding gash on her right arm, and her right eye was swollen completely shut. To make matters worse, she'd lost one of her sandals in the fall and was wearing nothing but a sleeveless mini dress. She was so unbelievably ill-equipped for the green hell of the Amazon, totally isolated in one of the most extreme, unforgiving environments on the planet.
Now, here is where things get really interesting. Julianne wasn't just any teenager. She actually had a huge, calculated advantage. Her parents were zoologists, and she grew up learning the rules of the jungle. And those lessons gave her a strategic blueprint to stay alive. Rule number 1, find water. Rule number 2, follow that water downhill until it forms a creek. And rule number 3, know that creeks flow into larger rivers, and rivers inevitably lead to human civilization. Instead of panicking, she relied on this mental framework to navigate the terrain.
But knowing the rules doesn't magically change your physical reality. As she embarked on what would turn out to be an 11-day trek, Julianne had absolutely zero supplies. Well, except for a single bag of candy she managed to scavenge from the crash site. That was literally her only source of calories. And she was up against the brutal Amazonian climate, which threw wild swings of sweltering, oppressive heat and freezing, torrential rain at a young woman in a mini dress. The contrast between what she had and what she was facing is just staggering.
To actually make any progress, she made a really tactical choice. The jungle brush on land was thorny, dense, and virtually impenetrable, so she decided to follow the water by wading directly through it, often waist-deep. Now, while this kept her moving and sticking to her parents' rules, staying in that murky, dark water set up a terrifying realization. The unseen dangers lurking just beneath the surface were actually way worse than the thickets up on land. That water was just teeming with predators. To survive, she had to use a stick to probe the mud ahead of every single step, just to scare away deadly stingrays hiding in the muck. And when the creeks deepened into pools, she had no choice but to swim, fully aware that caimans, large Amazonian crocodiles, were swimming right alongside her in the dark. But crazy enough, it wasn't the giant predators that posed the biggest threat. The ultimate horror started on day 9, and it came from something much, much smaller.
By the 9th day, a terrifying new threat emerged. That deep cut on her right arm had become severely infected. Relentless jungle flies had actually laid eggs directly inside her open wound, and now flesh-eating maggots were hatching and moving around beneath her skin. This was a literal ticking clock. If she couldn't find a way to get them out, the infection was absolutely going to kill her long before starvation or any predator could. By day 10, she could barely stand. She was hallucinating from total exhaustion and having zero real food. But then, a massive turning point. She stumbled upon a small wooden boat moored quietly to the riverbank. Right near it was a crude, empty lumberjack shelter. And sitting inside that shelter, she found a crucial, completely unexpected item: a simple can of gasoline.
What she did next is definitely not for the faint of heart, but it is what saved her life. She remembered this trick her dad used to remove botfly larvae from their family dog, and she went for it. Step 1, she poured the raw, burning gasoline directly into her open wound. Step 2, she had to endure the blinding, agonizing pain as the chemical reacted with her flesh and the insects. But step 3, it worked. The maggots were forced to the surface, and she physically pulled over 30 of them out of her arm. Completely spent, she just collapsed and fell asleep on the floor of the hut.
The very next morning, 3 local lumberjacks returned to their camp. Can you imagine their shock? They see this pale, battered girl in their hut, and their first thought was actually steeped in local mythology. They genuinely thought she was a water spirit. But then Juliane looked up and spoke to them in fluent Spanish, and the illusion broke. They instantly realized who she was. After all, the entire country had been frantically searching for Flight 508. They fed her, treated her wounds the best they could, and rushed her downriver to safety.
Which brings us to a really sobering reality. 92. That is the total number of passengers and crew members who were aboard Lanza Flight 508 on that fateful Christmas Eve. 92 lives caught inside that massive storm cell.
And out of all 92 people who plummeted from the sky that day, Juliane Kopka was the solitary survivor. 1. When you really feel the sheer weight of those numbers, it drives home the absolute, undeniable miracle of her making it out of that jungle alive.
But you know what's perhaps the most beautiful part of this whole story? It's the aftermath. Juliane didn't let the trauma of the jungle defeat her. Instead, she leaned right into her roots. She went on to earn a PhD in biology. And incredibly, she went back. She returned to the exact same Peruvian jungle to continue her parents' legacy in wildlife conservation. She literally transformed the site of her greatest nightmare into a lifelong mission of study and protection.
Juliane's story is just so much more than a tale of surviving a plane crash. It really forces us to look at the sheer resilience of the human spirit. And it leaves us with this final, provocative thought to take away from today's explainer. When pushed past the absolute limit, when you are stripped of everything but the sheer will to live, what is the true capacity of human endurance?